Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to our listeners around the country, around the world, throughout the galaxy. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and we are recording episode 455 with two amazing team therapists. So excited to have them both on the podcast. Angela Crum, who is a clinical psychologist and one of the co-owners of the Feeling Good Institute. She practices in Mountain View and throughout the state of California.
Hello.
Hello. And Angela, you've been one of David's students since you couldn't, for the last more than 15 years, 20 years.
Yeah, I got to meet David when I was doing a postdoc at the counseling center at Stanford, and he was offering the training for therapists and fell in love with Team CBT. And he's seen me through a lot of changes in life, including a really fun phase of learning to flirt and practice social skills. So I'm very grateful to David.
Yeah. And we're also super excited to have Lee Harrington, who's a psychiatrist that works out of Davis and Sunnyvale, and again, throughout California online. And Lee was a resident in one of David's first residency programs at Stanford, and then eventually became the chief resident before she graduated and started her practice in Davis. So we're so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm delighted to be here and talk about such a fun and important topic and to see old friends.
Before we dive in, and I know you have some other business items here, but can you, Lee, and you, Angela, just tell us the kind of clinical work that you specialize in case any of our listeners are looking for a good strength that knows Team CBT?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, David. I specialize in seeing people, especially with anxiety, social anxiety and social skills, social confidence building, and people with relationship challenges who want to deepen, improve their relationships, and people who are looking to tweak their habits, especially those areas. And relationships could be intimate relationships or could be parenting. Parenting is one of my favorite areas. I have 2 young girls that I am parenting, and it's a dear and close to my heart topic. I also see people who are struggling with depression.
Great.
As well. And those are the main focus. Yeah.
Cool. That's great, Lee. Those are all good things to do. This is Angela. I also love treating social anxiety and teaching social skills and flirting skills to clients. I also really enjoy working with all forms of fears and phobias, insomnia. And then probably the other area I enjoy the most is helping people with making lifestyle changes around health and weight management goals. In general, I work with adults, so I'm an adult generalist for folks in California. Thanks for asking.
I'd love to start off reading a podcast endorsement about our episode 451, where Taylor talked about working with parents when there are teen troubles. And Stacy wrote in and she said, podcast 451 came just at the right time, as I have a 15-year-old stepdaughter, and recently there has been a lot of teen troubles. I'm not raising her, but I have a relationship with her and a lot of compassion and love for her and her parents. In general, I wanted to use this occasion to thank Taylor, Rhonda, and David, and the whole team for your gift to humanity. Your methods have helped me with procrastination, depression, anxiety, and my relationships. I struggled with depression, but since I learned about Team CBT methods, it really hasn't come back. And all I did was regularly listen to the podcast and read Feeling Great and do 1 or 2 mood logs. When I feel in the need of a tune-up, I re-listen to my favorite episodes, and it dissolves my negative thoughts pretty quickly. The power of the podcast is not just in the methods you teach, but in your interactions with each other. Hearing your voices and how you all interact with each other is like an island of hope to me. It makes me feel connected, and it's a reminder that there's good in people and that the world is not just getting worse or going backwards. I have so much love for you all, and I hope that you feel that in some way. Sincerely, Stacy.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you for that, Stacy. What a beautiful comment. Means a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much
That's
for
beautiful.
all those kind words. So we're going to talk some more about dating. And we've been starting off now by giving just kind of a brief overview about what you want to touch on before we dive into it in more depth. So, Lee, do you want to give us a 90-second overview or a 2-minute overview about what you're going to be
or
talking
even a
about?
30-second, like what are our listeners going to learn from you today,
yeah.
Lee?
Thank you. What a great idea. Well, I hope that they'll learn something about safety and having fun in dating, about avoiding dating the wrong people, and supporting dating the right people, deepening connection with people, and setting the relationship up for success.
It sounds great. So they'll learn about safety on dating, how to have fun while dating, avoid dating the wrong people, and how to set up a relationship for success. And so if that interests any of you, stay tuned and you'll learn the secrets of achieving those
we might
goals.
touch on avoiding dating apps turning into an addiction also. We'll see if we get to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Rhonda? Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Angela?
All those things Lee mentioned are exciting things we'll talk about. Maybe I'll just say a tiny bit more that we will also hopefully cover some examples of how to generate a conversation when dating new people, things like openers or what David Burns has taught us, the talk show host, different techniques we can use when dating, as well as various other flirting skills that can get things started and have create some fun in the process. I think that'll be a lot to cover, and we're excited to do it.
Angela, before we started recording, you were telling us how you got interested in this topic, and it was in one of the groups that you're in with David. Will you tell us that story?
Yeah, I'd love to briefly share it. It was very fun that I was very fortunate to be brokenhearted at a time in life when I was surrounded by really cool people who were excited to learn about flirting. And so I was married young and divorced young, and the divorce was initiated by my ex-husband, and I was already a member of the Tuesday group. And so I had the joy of being surrounded by people who not only helped bolster me up by working through my negative thoughts about what it meant to be going through this divorce, but very quickly we were able to pivot towards having a little bit of what I called like a lab of people learning to flirt together. So we were taking techniques from intimate connections and growing them and trying them out together out in the real world. And it turned into a lot of fun. It created a real contagious spirit of folks in my personal life joining as well. And from that, I've really fell in love with teaching people flirting skills and developing a list of them, which I've continued to edit and develop over time.
And we'll include that list of flirting skills, which is really cool, in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, great.
Lee, how did you get interested in this subject?
Was anyone directing the show? I remember we did a session in the Tuesday group the day, I think it was, that your husband announced to you, which was, I think, a bit of a horrible shock and surprise that he was divorcing you and leaving you. And and then I think I had the general idea for you to the best way to get revenge is to find happiness and find someone else who is awesome, and fall in love. And at that point, your husband would come crawling back, and you could kick sand in his face then. And although that didn't appeal to you because you didn't want to use your power to hurt him, even though he'd hurt you, but I think when you went out then into the dating world, were you just like teaching yourself, or was somebody mentoring you a little bit on these flirting skills and things that you've become such an expert in?
Yeah, there were really a crew of us from the Team CBT training crew who were kind of supporting each other and learning them and using your guidance and intimate connections as our base. But people like Matt May, Jacob Towery, Stephen Fleiter, a number of folks from the community who were willing, Laura Katz as well, who were kind of eager in learning these things together. And so it's quite a powerhouse and a lot of fun in the process.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. I didn't know all that was going on, but it's exciting to hear about it for sure.
Bea, how'd you get interested in this topic?
That's a good question. I think I've developed interest over time. A little bit more. One of the things was having clients or patients who suffered with social anxiety, and then going out with them and helping them be able to connect with people, and the just dramatic impact it had, positive impact that it had on their life and their enjoyment, their ability to connect with others is so rewarding and fun. It's such a joy to be able to be a part of that with people. And sometimes people are feeling shy or socially awkward or self-conscious. And most of us are to some degree. And then once they're able to connect with people, oftentimes they want to connect with a partner, and helping people do that is super rewarding. I think our intimate, our special, cherished relationships are one of the most treasured things we have in life. So I love to help people be able to initiate and develop and grow those.
When did you then take your patients out into the world and have them talk to strangers and things like this? Yes, we go out in the world, we talk to strangers, we face our fears, and we triumph. And it's so, so fun. Yeah. Can you give us an example of the kind of cool, outrageous, or interesting, or fun things that you were doing with shy patients and strangers?
Sure. One comes to mind, and this is kind of getting used to talking with people, which is a step on the way to flirting or dating or developing a deep connection. But one step was we went to a drugstore. And we asked the clerk for some help in locating the toenail fungus treatment. and then the person I was with was feeling quite self-conscious about it. Like 8 out of 10. But quite honestly, I was probably feeling 2 or 3 out of 10. I don't normally go into the store and ask for toenail fungus treatment. However, it was so fantastic. We asked, and we met the kindest clerk, who just was had so much empathy for us and our toenail fungus issue. It was so heartwarming to me and the person I was with. It felt like a special moment. Like I still have a special warmth in my heart for the person I was out with doing this, as well as the clerk who helped us. And we said, well, what if it's really bad? And the clerk was like, oh yeah, giving us suggestions about whether we should wear boots and socks, and was just kind of embraced us in our challenge. And it's also an example of, sharing some vulnerability with someone and being met in a really warm way. Yeah.
Neat. Yeah.
Angela, you've done that too, haven't you? Taken people out. Do you have a story that's illustrative of what you've done?
Yeah, I think it's a hallmark of really teaching people skills is needing to get folks trying things and confronting their fears, and also learning new skills. So I will take folks out to do all kinds of activities. Probably my favorite that builds on flirting is really trying openers with people on the street. And so openers are any way to start a conversation. There's a handful of ones that can be effective, which I can go into a little bit more detail on in a little while maybe. But yeah, we can have fun ways to get people engaged, like asking them for advice or questions as a way to start a conversation, and then looping in other skills like offering compliments or giving them positive feedback when they're actually giving you recommendations. And of course, using our body language on top to flirt in the process. So lots of ways that we can practice those skills and give people feedback along the way.
What do you mean exactly when you talk about flirting?
What do I mean by flirting? Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a really fair question. Clients will ask all the time, and we have to think about it. What does that mean to you? Right. And I really think of flirting as simply good social skills with just a little edge of fun and playful that can breed attraction and form a little bit more deep connection. So really the difference between social skills and flirting skills is hardly there at all, right? If you already know how to make friends, you are ready to flirt. And maybe we just want to take a little bit more risk to be a little bit sillier, a little bit more provocative, a little bit more playful and engaging. For folks who feel like, gosh, I don't even know if my social skills are very strong to begin with, then we say, well, let's start with that. Let's start with the basic skills of getting other people talking, putting the spotlight on them, helping them feel good about themselves, showing interest, right? And then we can add on the things that feel a bit more exciting or engaging in a way of what we'd call flirting. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah. And so what are some flirting skills?
Sure. Let's jump into some of those. So, I mentioned openers before. Let me say a little bit more about that then, because those are great ways to get in. So openers are anything we use to start off a conversation and to kind of get it launching, right? And so there's lots of different ways we can do it. For example, we can ask open-ended questions. We can give compliments with genuine positive feedback. We can find connection with someone on the street. And
how would you find connection with a stranger? On the street?
Yeah, so by looking for something in common, right? So we could be, let's say you can imagine this wherever you're going to go meet people in the world. So maybe you're someone who's going to go to bars or clubs. Maybe you're going to go to the public library. Maybe you're going to be at like a networking event through your professional situation, or maybe you're just randomly on the street buying a coffee at the corner cafe. And we would find connection by finding something that appears to be in common. So maybe someone's wearing a hat with a team that you feel connected to. And so making a comment about that, instead of just keeping your ideas silent in your head, you're going to verbalize these things of, oh, you like the Giants. I like the Giants too. Or, oh, I see you wearing that pink shirt. Pink's one of my favorite colors too. Right. And so it's a name and find connection as a way to open a conversation. Of course, we see how they respond. And if they seem warm and open, then we can continue the conversation. Another great opener is actually talking to yourself. And that sounds really goofy, but let me give you an example. So we love as humans in our society to kind of complain or to point out things. And so we can point out the obvious of positive things, or we complain about negative. So many of our listeners today have probably stood in a long line before and heard someone say, oh man, this line is brutal today. And that actually seems really simple, but serves as an opener because it verbalizes something going on, that if people around you are interested in engaging with you, then they have something to respond to, right? It gives them an opening to turn and say, I know, I've been waiting an hour. How about you? And if they're disinterested, they get to just look away and go back to playing on their phone, right? Another great opener, I have clients all the time go to the grocery store and stand in front of the apple display. So many apples, right? So they try an opener of just naming, how in the world am I supposed to know what apples to buy when there's 20 choices? And almost always someone will respond to that opener and engage them, at least in agreeing with the perplexity of apples, or sometimes engaging a whole conversation. So as Lee had mentioned, I think in the last podcast, they talked about you can warm up with folks where you maybe aren't even attracted to them or trying to hit on them, but build up towards trying these openers around people who you actually do find attractive. Another great, as I mentioned, asking for advice is a great opener. People love to be helpful. And so there's many ways that you can ask for suggestions or help. I'll tell you one more silly story as an example of an opener that asked for help and also included one more flirting skill, which is called a false time constraint. And a false time constraint is when we take the pressure off the interaction by making it clear we only want a minute of their time. We're not trying to take over their evening or overwhelm them with too much time request. So I was out with a girlfriend. This was a bar example, and she saw some guys who she found very attractive, and she was struggling with knowing whether to approach them. We'd done the basics of kind of looking over to see if we could make eye contact and kind of positioning ourselves to seem open, but they were not approaching. So I said, just follow me. Let's go. I'm feeling brave. So I brought her with me without even telling her what we were going to do. And I stopped in front of these three men and I just said, hey guys, just pretend to talk to me for like 30 seconds. That's all I need. Just pretend for a few seconds. And of course, we get this pause, but they're super intrigued now, right? Because I've asked them to help me with something. Just pretend to talk to me for 30 seconds. And I've put a false time constraint on it. So of course, now they're asking us a million questions. Why? What do you mean? What's going on? And I said, well, we just need to look busy for a little bit. We won't bother you very much. We're going to move on, but I just need us to look entertained for a bit. If you could just stick with me. And of course, they're like, I don't get it. What's happening? So now I'm making this up as I go. And I had to have a story of some type. So I went with some version of, oh, well, we were talking to someone earlier and it was getting kind of awkward and I just needed a way to get away. But don't worry, again, we're moving on. Don't worry about us. We can probably move on in a second. It will be all good. And of course they didn't let us go, right? They start engaging the conversation. Suddenly it's like, well, what are you guys up to tonight? And where are you going next? And we ended up spending the whole rest of the evening kind of club bouncing with them and having fun. And my friend left with, the number of the person that she was excited about meeting that night. And it was super fun. So it was an example of an opener, kind of a silly one with a false time constraint, right? That worked really well just to get the conversation started. And I think that one was particularly effective because it was kind of playful and brought up like intrigue. It leaves people kind of curious and wondering. And that's a fun element of flirtation, right? Is to create a little intrigue.
And you had to be brave to do that.
That did take bravery. Yeah, that's when I tell folks who are really shy, that's like an advanced one. That's really putting yourself out there and being willing to take the plunge. And that's why we've got a whole gamut of starting small, saying hello to people, asking for simple recommendations. Where could I get some ice cream? Oh, that coffee looks great. Where did you buy it? And then building up towards these ones that might feel a little bit more over the top.
That was beautiful, Angela. I like how you called out that you were doing this. You were using an opener, your time constraints. And I was just as you were going along and I was like, and you were being so fun and playful and you were creating this interest and this intrigue, a little bit of mystery. That was probably super fun for them. We want to be involved in that. You offered them something fun. You were like, hey, you want to play? And they did.
Yeah, that's the spirit of it.
Right.
Angela, we were emailing each other, and one of the things we wanted to talk about is once we start dating, how do you get the connection to deepen and to grow if you're really interested in someone?
Yeah, I'd love to hear Lee talk about that as well. I'll share one activity that I like to do with clients who are struggling with this, and then I'll let Lee share on kind of what does she think about that. So a lot of folks I work with will struggle with deepening past the original flirtation. And you may, as a listener, relate to this if you're someone who's not like what we call an open book, meaning maybe you hold your cards close to your heart and you don't like to share a lot about yourself up front. There's other folks who share very freely and openly and therefore can get kind of deep really quickly. And I wouldn't argue that one is the right or wrong path because sometimes we open up so fast and get so deep that can be too quick as well, right? That there can be dangers in that of getting kind of overly invested or getting intimate too quickly. So when clients are grappling with how they want to approach it, of course, I'm asking them to think a lot about their own values and belief systems about how open and deep you should be with people and at what pace. But I sometimes also have them create what I just kind of made up this term. I'm calling it an intimacy hierarchy. And by intimacy here, I don't necessarily mean physical intimacy. I mean emotional intimacy. Although you could use the same concept with creating a physical hierarchy of how and when you want to be intimate. But to do this, I just invite clients to spend some time reflecting, and we'll do it through conversation and through writing up lists of what are the types of topics like sharing you might do about yourself, your opinions, your views, your history, what made you who you are, that you see as really things you're open about that you could share with someone you've just met. And then what are the things that you hold dearest and most private that you might wait to share after you've built more trust and safety? And we loosely put those in kind of a rank order, not a perfect system, but kind of loosely, things we're willing to share early on, things that feel more intimate. And I'm always surprised by the range of people's needs here. You know, some people say, for example, oh gosh, my political beliefs are really private and intimate. And others say, oh man, I'd share that with any stranger on the street. And so, it just really shows this is guided by our own values and belief systems, not by some standard hierarchy we should all follow. Once you have that hierarchy, it can help guide how to deepen connection with others by kind of inviting yourself to go a little deeper as you build safety and trust with people. So what I suggest is that in early connections with folks, you share some of the things you feel safer sharing, and you wait to see how it's received. What does that mean? How is it received? So how does the person respond? Do they respond with respect, with interest? If it feels like a little bit of a secret, do they seem respectful of that secret? Do they make you feel safe in sharing more? And if the answers are yes, then maybe you feel ready to go a little deeper. But if you're getting the sense from the person that they're not respectful of who you are, of what you've shared, then you probably wouldn't go deeper, right? It would be a red flag for you to pull back and protect yourself. And so this isn't a system that everyone needs. Some folks don't struggle with deciding how much to share, but it can be helpful for listeners who are really grappling with this idea, who maybe feel like, gosh, I don't know how much to share. I don't know how to trust people. I don't know when I can open up more. Because the truth is, at some point, you do have to move past the basic flirting if you actually want a real relationship. If you don't want to just keep it kind of light and fluffy all the time. Lee, what are your thoughts? I've been rambling on a lot about this.
I loved your rambling. I thought you were right on, Angela. And I think the pieces of deepening the relationship are fun, are emotional and maybe physical, but I'm going to focus on emotional intimacy and getting through challenging times. And you talk some about kind of flirting and that, kind of having lighthearted fun. I think that's super important. And then I'm going to kind of quote a quote of a quote. I'm kind of making a new quote, but that intimacy is the mutual exploration of a shared safe place when it's held that we trust each other in that space, and we trust each other to kind of keep that space safe. So I loved how you incorporated so many pieces of that as you were speaking. So I want to first kind of call those out. First, that there's a variety of what people are comfortable with. Some people are, as you said, comfortable with sharing something with anyone, a political belief or a fear or a challenge they've had. And for some people, that's a very tender, special thing that they would only share with the people they feel most safe and comfortable and intimate with. And that we have kind of a hierarchy of those things. We each have our own map of what things are kind of most precious and held close to us and we're more comfortable with. And it's nice to have a mixture of those things and to really deepen the relationship. We'll want to have fun. We'll want to have challenges that we get through. Maybe we'll speak about the getting through challenges in a moment, and then have vulnerability, which we could also call some people like the term vulnerability and some people don't. We could call that kind of like telling the truth bravely might be another way to think of being vulnerable. And getting.
Lee, when you're talking about this, Lee, how do you know that this person is a safe person to open up with?
That's a really good question. It reminds me of, I know you, Rhonda, you have your set of 4 questions that I don't know if you'd like to share with folks. And I know you and I have played around with those over the last few years a bit. So maybe that would be something great. And then I have some other other ideas of safety. And I think it's,
well, that emotional safety that you need in order to open your heart up and allow yourself permission to share intimate things about your life or who you are as a person.
I think that we have a sense of that ahead of time, and we all then take a risk and test if that sense is correct or not. And so I might not have the full information until I've taken a risk. And that's why I think the idea, as Angela said, of kind of a hierarchy, or I have kind of a staircase reference that I use, that, to do kind of a little testing of that, right? So if I'm hanging out with Angela and wanting to kind of like deepen my relationship with Angela, and I think Angela's a safe person. At least that's my theory. It's good to kind of theorize. If I theorize, I feel pretty safe with Angela. I think so. And then what's a small thing that I could share with her? And it's nice to share those things, kind of sharing and curiosity, for it to be, it's a mutual exploration, right? So it might be that I share a curiosity that I have with Angela, as well as a fear that I have, or a discomfort, or wondering, or a apprehension. Maybe I'll say, gosh, I feel a little scared of roller coasters sometimes, even though I used to love them. But now I get on them and they feel kind of rickety and they're shaking, and I don't feel comfortable. I'm wondering, like, how do you feel about roller coasters, Angela?
And if I want to build safe with you, I'm going to be warm and responsive, right? And maybe share a little vulnerably myself as well, right? Meet your disclosure with a little disclosure about my own fears or
and
worries.
So when Angela meets my fear with warmth, she's signaling to me that this is a safe place. And when she reciprocates sharing something, even just her feelings, maybe she doesn't feel uncomfortable about roller coasters. Maybe she's like, oh, I love roller coasters. I feel completely at ease. But, I feel a little ill at ease in this setting. Then she would be signaling, I'm safe with her warmth. And then she'd be signaling, and I'd like to get a little closer also.
So taking little baby steps and testing that.
To be able to get feedback. And, we never know the future, and we never know all of everything about someone. So we're usually going off our initial assumption. And there are things we can do, to kind of make sure kind of ahead of time, if we want to go down the path of thinking about safety ahead of time. But we can do things to make it more likely that we're talking with someone that we feel safe with. The questions that you developed, maybe you'd like to share, as well as a number of things we can do as we just even decide if we're going to go on a date with someone, if we're going to even meet someone.
One thing I like about the approach that both of you are taking here is you're kind of testing the other person. It's like an experiment to see what kind of connections are possible with this person, so you have the data if they're going to be a good choice for you. Is there a dysfunctional way of doing it where some people go in asking questions because they're so anxious to find, and they want to push for a deep relationship, and this anxiety actually pushes the other person away? Because one of the things when I was treating single people, that it seemed that one of the big errors that some single people made was to push so hard for a more open and vulnerable and close relationship when the other person was still in a kind of a bit of a game playing phase. And so they're mismatched in terms of what's going on. And some people had to learn that when you're trying to open up to get to a more loving place and the other person is kind of pulling back, then you need to pull back yourself and go into that game playing mode again. I don't know quite how to say it, but it's like maintaining control rather than just being, vulnerable until, you get formally rejected. Like if someone else is pulling away, then you need to pull away yourself. Like there's seems to be kind of a power struggle sometimes. Who's going to chase who? And there's a test that happens, like who's going to do the chasing here.
It makes me think, David, I love that you're pointing that out, because that error can certainly happen. And it makes me think of, dancing and two dancers with some space between them. And you want, dancers to be able to kind of take a step or two apart and take a step or two closer and a step or two apart. And if they move too far away, there's nothing really going on between them. But if they move too close, they're kind of smothering. Right. And
right.
And we can get off sync. Right. If Angela and I were at the roller coaster fear level, and then suddenly I dive into, something super, super deep and personal that I, wouldn't only want to share with my most treasured person. And, Angela, it's our first time speaking in our lives.
Right.
That would obviously
overwhelmed.
She would be very likely to feel overwhelmed. And then not because of anything necessarily wrong with me or even with sharing, but by that sharing, I might be forcing Angela to push me away. Because the only way she can breathe if I'm kind of smothering her is to push me away. It's just a natural.
Do you think there's a kind of game that goes on early in many, if not all, relationships, like who's going to chase who?
Sure.
And if so, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think you should share some of your ideas too, David, because I think we all can, see it similarly and a little different. I definitely think, though, what I've learned both in personal experience and what I'll explore a lot with clients is this idea that I am someone who really believes in genuine authenticity. And so it's very hard for me when anyone starts talking about gaminess in dating. And despite that discomfort with the idea of the game, I do think that it is really important to pace ourselves and slow down to breed attraction because of what we're discussing, right? That we can overwhelm and smother people with too much too quickly. An example I experienced was I was on one of these dates that I thought was super casual. I was meeting a guy for a drink, and we had met dancing one night. I love going dancing, and that was a big part of my single life. And within moments of sitting down, he was interviewing me to be the mother of his child. And I was so caught off guard because I was a single woman without children. And in retrospect, when I've told this story, I've had lots of single parents in the dating scene go, absolutely, he was interviewing you on date one because this is the most important thing in his life, is if he's going to go on a second date with someone, he needs to know this is someone who would be a great parent to his child. And I have huge respect for it. And guess what? I probably would have been an awesome parent to his child. I'm a pretty good parent now. I feel really good about my parenting. But he scared the heck out of me because it was drink one. Right. And so he absolutely overwhelmed me and scared me. It felt like, wow, I'm actually being interviewed to be married off when I literally had just said red wine or white wine. It was too much, too fast. And so it's an example where, had he been able to slow down even just a little, it's very possible I would have been an awesome, mom to his child someday. So what I encourage people to do is to take it slowly. What my husband, I love to tell this story. I'm remarried now, and I paced with my husband, which felt a bit gamey, but I literally set up all these rules playfully and with a lot of flirtation and kind of a sexy attitude of, I'm only going to see you once a week. And he'd be like, why? I'd be like, because that's good. I've got a full life and I'm busy.
Yeah, right. That's great. I love that.
And so now he's kind of saying, well, why not twice a week? And then, 3 weeks later, I'm super into him. I'm enjoying it. And I'm like, okay, twice a week. I'll give you twice a week. But that's it, right? And it actually became this fun, flirty thing where we would try to tempt each other into breaking the rules. And we'd take turns honoring the rules. Be like, oh, I know, wouldn't it be fun to come hang out? But no, I'm a rule follower. And we'd kind of play this game. So we were actually playing the game. And it was conscious on my part because actually it was authentic to say, I actually really do like this guy. And I need to slow down because I'm someone who likes to go deep quickly. I like intimacy. I like being really connected. And I want to get to know him at a pace that keeps my eyes wide open, where I can still look for yellow flags and red flags and move slowly. And if I'm hanging out with him all the time and putting myself out there, not only do I risk overwhelming him and scaring him away the way I felt when I was interviewed too quickly to be the mom, right? But I might also just ruin the chance for me to make a good, careful decision by slowing down and really getting to know this guy at the right pace, right? So I don't like to, I think sometimes the gaminess, it gets an all bad rap, but we want to think about the main take home concept is it is powerful to move slowly. It's powerful to create intrigue and interest by being a little less than 100% available, by conveying that you have other interests, a full life. And even if you don't have other interests or a full life yet, it's actually one of the first things I assign to people who are bored and lonely and kind of desperate to date is I'm like, let's get busy becoming an active person with a full life before you start dating, right? So that you come into this from an empowered place with other things to do so that you don't move too quickly. So those are my thoughts on it. David, you probably would say it in a little bit more extreme way. Is that fair to say? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the way you put it is just really awesome. That the way I used to explain it to people, because that was the big error I saw people making is, you finally start getting a couple dates and you want to, marry this person. And then you find yourself getting rejected over and over again because, again, people only want what they can't get and they never want what they can get. And not understanding that principle can lead to so much heartbreak and disappointment. But I think it takes, as you were saying, some discipline. And I used to say like birds, if they want to mate, they have to, do their little dance and whatever the flirtation type of thing they do. And if the bird refuses to do that, say, well, I'm above that, you're not going to get a chance to get any sex or lay any eggs or have any children. And that kind of game playing can be done in a thoughtful way, and which is I love the way you express it there, that you're protecting yourself and the other person as well from getting overwhelmed by too much too soon, too desperate, too needy, too eager, and. I think the whole universe is set up that way. I mean, I used to, when I was growing up, collect rare coins and paper money. It was kind of a hobby. But if you're going to an auction, which item do you want the most? It's the one that sells for the most. It might be an ugly old coin, but if it's, costs a fortune, that's such a fantastic thing there. Everybody wants it. And I can't have it. I can't afford it. But, it would be so great to have that coin or that rare banknote or something like that.
Right.
And I think that principle applies to electrons and neutrons and positrons and it just the dynamic of the universe, and if you don't understand it and work with it a little bit, you just keep running into a lot of frustration, and especially men. I think women were more kind of creative and flexible and happy to learn the kinds of things that you two are so beautifully teaching. And men were often more stubborn, thinking, I shouldn't have to do that, and a lot of kind of entitlements that are just kind of ridiculous. And
part of what you're talking about, Angela, I feel like I did that too with my husband, is that I decided right away, I thought this is a special person. And I wanted to make sure that we moved slowly because I wanted to create a friendship before we moved into a romantic attachment. And I thought, well, we're going to have 5 dates before I'm going to let him like kiss me or do anything intimate. And on the 4th date, we went out to dinner, and at that time I lived in San Francisco and he lived in Oakland. And so it was about an hour drive from where we each lived. And he wanted to come up and use the bathroom before he went home. And I said, you can't come into my apartment. Because in my head, I was like, no. And he's like, I just want to use the bathroom. And I thought, nope, not going to, nope. And so I just set this really firm boundary. Nope, you're not coming to the apartment. There's a gas station at the corner. You can just use the bathroom there. Because sometimes when you introduce sex prematurely into dating, it can be like confusing and interrupt the intimacy. You have this kind of intense feeling for someone that comes out of sex, but you don't really know them. And that can lead to a negative or an unhealthy or unwanted outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another reason to think about pacing around what are your boundaries and needs and wishes around the physical part as well. And some people just pace physically, some pace emotionally. Yeah, you have to really do some reflection on what your priorities and needs are and what will feel right for you. But yeah, anything that creates the intrigue and makes it just not desperate, right? Not needy is what I think we're focusing on as a theme to show like, I'm okay on my own. And you might be an awesome supplement to my life. And it might even grow into something really amazing that's very connected, but I'm not going to chase it with like so much energy that it seems kind of yucky to the other person. Yeah.
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 I love that.
And in many ways,
I think we've,
Oh, yeah.
I was going to ask you another question,
In
Lee.
many ways, that allows you to get to know each other better and allows you to, assess. You were talking about like kind of having confusion, Rhonda, and I think it can happen that, and Angela mentioned red flags or yellow flags. Like if we've moved to where we're already kind of like, oh, right, we're like having this close, intimate relationship, then we're going to have a confirmation bias of like wanting to confirm this decision that we're suddenly jumped into something that's a little bit ahead of where we are. And then we may consciously or unconsciously dismiss things that would be important signals to us of whether someone would be a good match for us.
Oh, I love that. That makes so much sense. I've never heard it put that way. That's really brilliant. And then Lee, we had talked about a little bit before the podcast. How do you, let's say you've started a relationship and you've gone on a significant number of dates, whatever that is, and then you decide, well, maybe I don't want to be in a relationship with this person. How do you extricate yourself from it?
Yeah, I think that we can feel, people can feel anxious about that, nervous, either wanting to just suddenly cut off contact or feeling like the contact needs to go on longer than they really want that to be. And I think, how can we exit this relationship? Kind of adding, being mindful of the dignity of both people, of both myself and the other. Like, how can we gracefully exit with dignity to both parties? And maybe even adding. So I think, how can I be kind of the best, just as when I'm in a relationship and developing a close relationship, I want the best part of me to come out. When I'm not having a relationship with someone, I also want to practice becoming the best person I can be. And how would I exit this if, someone was watching and I wanted them to be kind of cheering for how I did that? Or how would I exit this if I were, sitting next to their mom or their dad and wanting to just uphold their dignity or even give them something? So some ways to do that gracefully would be letting them know, I think we're not a good match. If you want to discuss it further, I'd be happy to do that. Because sometimes there's a specific thing the person did that kind of put you off. That's happened for me where I met someone, I thought, this seems like a good enough person in a way, like I want to give them the gift of being aware of something. And so you can offer that to someone. They may or may not be interested in that. But I think that's one nice way of doing that. And not that that would be something that went on for a long, like had numerous discussions or even a lengthy discussion, but just, I felt a little bit rubbed the wrong way when, you tried to kiss me without asking, or I felt a little rubbed the wrong way when you said this kind of unkind thing about this other person, or whatever the case may be. That's one sentence. So it's very short and sweet, and saying that like in a kind and caring way for the other person, because it may not be something that they're aware of, and it could be a gift to them to become aware of that. Sometimes we're talking about, red flags to avoid, and we might talk about safety and ways to make sure that we're not, that we're avoiding kind of the wrong people. Or when we say the wrong people, I sometimes feel a little protective of, like, well, what about if we say, oh, I should avoid people who X, Y, and Z? Well, what about the people who are X, Y, and Z? And they're probably also on their path of learning how, like, what can they take from that? Oh, they can learn that, like, to, talk down about someone doesn't feel good to others. It doesn't create a safe place. Right. And they might be doing that without even realizing that that could be a turnoff to others and could be a potential growth area for them. In many ways, we like hire our partner to help us become the best part of ourselves. So offering someone like, ooh, I think this could be, like even more shined up and beautiful by making this adjustment. And then the receiver of that gets to decide, ooh, is that going to make me like a better version of myself? I'd love that. If I did something, yeah.
I love what you're saying, and I can see two related questions. One is something I saw, I would say, from time to time to, almost fairly often in my practice, where two people are going out, but one of them, who is my patient, is clearly doesn't see this other person as a long-time relationship at all, but is staying in the relationship for fear of hurting the other person, thinking the other person, needs me, etc. And what I often saw, kind of paradox, is the longer they stay in the relationship with this person, the more they're actually hurting them.
Right.
And the fear of hurting someone's feelings and breaking up with someone. What do you think about that?
I think your patient who doesn't want to hurt the other person probably has a very kind and tender, loving, caring heart in wanting to protect the other person, and at the same time, that you're completely right on. The longer they stay together, the more hurtful they're being, not intentionally. And I might ask, if I were in your patient's shoes, I might ask myself, would I want someone to stay with me kind of out of pity or not when they don't want to? And I for sure wouldn't want to have someone staying with me when they didn't want to. That would feel not good to me. So I think asking myself that question could be helpful.
Well, those are some great questions. And then my other question was, what the other side of it? Have either of you been involved with personally, or your patients with someone involved with, say, a fellow who won't take no for an answer and kind of turns into a stalker type of situations? Maybe too far from our topic. I'm not sure, but it's certainly an important question, and it's not rare, and it can be pretty ugly as well.
Angela, I don't know if you have experience. Want to speak to that? I have a couple thoughts about that. Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that points out to why safety and physical safety. We talked about emotional safety. we haven't touched on physical safety quite as much. I think physical safety is quite important as well. And we can do a number of things to help protect our physical safety in the beginning. So many people meet on dating apps. I think the vast majority now, so I'm going to assume that many do. And, we can, not share our phone numbers, right, initially with someone until we've met a time or two. We cannot let the person know where we live for the first number of dates. Angela and Rhonda both talked about kind of like having rules, which are just kind of like guidelines for ourselves. But someone might have a guideline of sometimes someone can very sweetly like, oh, I'd be happy to pick you up. And if it was too soon for me, I'd say it's so sweet. And I would definitely appreciate the gesture warmly. And then say, no, I'm happy to meet you in this location. And I would usually do that for the first 2, 3, maybe more times, depending on the situation.
Meeting in a public safe
meeting in a public safe location until I get to meet that person in person. We've talked about some things, and we can talk a little bit more about what we might be looking for when we meet someone. But one of the things we're looking for is congruence between kind of the words that they're saying and the way they hold their body and their tone of voice. And congruence is a way that we can kind of read safety. There might be ways in which people can convey congruence when they're not safe. But for the most part, that's a good sign that someone is safe. And we want to be able to do all the reading that we do just from text is a little bit, there's a lot of texting early on now. And just from text isn't usually enough to get a good enough sense of someone.
Yeah. Jacob has recommended limit your texts on dating apps to a couple of exchanges and then get together with the person in person. Don't have extended texting dialogues. I can't remember.
Yeah, it can just kind of go on endlessly and you don't actually know much, right? There could be lots of it's too easy to misrepresent, right? These concepts of either catfishing, where folks are totally misrepresented, or sometimes people talk about kitten fishing, which is like little misrepresentations of who you are. That it's so easy when the text go on endlessly. And so, a lot of people will advise folks to ask for a meetup sooner to find out if the person's serious. I've had other clients who say, I don't want to meet up soon because I have so many potential people I'm talking to online that I can't meet up with everyone right away. I have to weed them out through text. But again, this is like a decision each individual has to make based on how much time they're investing and what their priorities are. But I agree, getting to safety. I know we didn't really address stalking, David. That does feel like a whole nother topic of like big, what to do if it turns into that. But I love the idea about thinking about initial safety and how to make sure that you're putting yourself in good spaces. One thing I'll add to the initial safety is I just ask people to always think about think about their sexual decision making before they move into first dates, so that you're thoughtful about where your lines are and what you're comfortable with, really digging into what are your own wishes and urges. If you want to be someone who's hooking up very quickly with people or even on first dates, thinking about how are you going to do that safely, right? What are the circumstances? What will be your red flags, yellow flags, to make sure that you're in safe situations for that. If you plan to take it slow, as some people in the podcast have talked about, that's a little bit different, but thinking about those in advance, not making the decision on the first date after 3 or 4 drinks, but knowing in advance what you're looking for so that you can go in confidently, and conveying that is a really important part of maintaining safety.
My nephew went on a date with a woman that he met online, and he got there a little early. So he ordered 2 drinks, one for himself and one for her, thinking that he was being nice. And when she showed up, he said, "Oh, I ordered you that drink." And she said, I would never take a drink from you. No. Of course, he's a nice person and he's not a sociopath. And he was really stunned and learned a really good lesson that women don't feel as safe in the world as men. And that maybe that's one of the safety things that you're talking about is make sure that you're ordering your own drink, telling a friend or maybe a family member where you're going. And just being careful. I worked at a rape crisis center for about 4 years when I first got out of graduate school. And so many of the women came in and said, oh, I had this funny feeling that I wasn't safe, but I didn't want to hurt the person's feelings, so I didn't take myself out of it. And I thought, it's completely anecdotal, but so many of the women came in and said that. I thought, this is a huge lesson about intuition, that people are picking up cues in the world and that we really need to trust them, both positive and scary ones.
Right.
Yes, I think everybody doesn't pick up on that, but I think there's something to that, Rhonda. There's a lot of con artists in the world, especially in our field of psychotherapy and psychology and psychiatry, and a lot of promoters. And I can sense these people really quickly, and they're generally these real smooth talking types, and I think and my wife too is just super good at spotting these people and seeing through these people, and it's hard to read minds, and most of our hunches about other people will be pretty much off base, but I do believe that some of us are more sensitive to picking up on that dark side of human nature in people. And then sadly, some people just get sucked in by con artists. And, some people even say it happens sometimes in politics, but we don't talk about politics on this program, so we won't. But, it's some people are just good at sucking other people in and then exploiting them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the things we were going to talk about how to be safe and seek consent and ask for consent on the podcast. What are you guys' thoughts about that?
One thing that I think is really, that's kind of, safety, I think can sound like kind of a downer or a worrisome thing. But I think of safety as like setting us up for fun. So if I'm like, okay, I've done everything to be as safe as possible, then I can just relax and enjoy myself, have more fun. Because I'm like, I'm safe now. I've done my safety things and now I'm good to go. So I encourage people to not think of it as like an onerous task, but a way of setting themselves up for freedom and enjoyment. And, as Angela was talking about her, interactions with her husband, for what fun came out of that.
Yeah, it can be. I can speak just briefly to asking for consent, which youth growing up today, younger generations are being taught to ask for consent for physical activity and touch. And folks who are not part of the younger generation still tend to find this awkward and goofy. What's being advised and encouraged is actually asking someone for consent before there's touch versus just doing it. And I thought I'd just give a couple examples of today of how to do that in a fun, playful way that actually can be quite sexy and quite flirty, because most people's concerns are that it's awkward and ruins the mood. So when it comes to suggesting a first kiss, for example, there's lots of playful ways we can do that. Maybe all the listeners can you think of a fun way right now? Some examples I could give you are things like kind of like an assumption that they want to, something like, you really look like you want to kiss me right now. Is that right? You hear how I'm kind of asking, is that right? After accusing them of being interested in kissing me, right? Or I've been dying to kiss you since I laid eyes on you. Is tonight the night, right? So it's the compliment, it's flirtatious, and it's the ask, right? Another version, I know I'll regret it if I don't ask, is this the moment I get to kiss you, right? So these kind of playful, seductive ways can be really fun. The other thing that a older typical rule is following the 90-10, where you're using 90-10 rule, which is you're using a physical lean to kind of ask for permission. So you lean in 90% of the way, you make the other person come at you with the last 10% as kind of a final check that they're wanting to meet you that way. A very flirtatious way, even to start first physical touch, is to do what's called fake touch and see how the person responds. So if I'm sitting near someone, maybe we're at dinner, we're at a bar, we're at a networking event, and we're having this really nice connection, when I'm going to lean towards them and like have my hand hover near their arm, shoulder, or knee, in a flirtatious way, but not actually make contact, and then withdraw my hand. And so what I've done is created the illusion of touch that actually creates a little intrigue, like they're left sometimes kind of yearning for a bit more, if in fact it's wanted, but I haven't actually touched them. And now if they respond in kind. So you can do this to someone, and if they respond with the same, they're kind of like, without verbally doing consent, we're playing this flirtatious game that can then lead to going ahead and holding hands or letting a hand rest on a knee. And so we're using that as a way to both build the intrigue and the allure, the kind of spiciness of it, as well as see if they're interested in versus just assuming. So lots of fun ways you can play with it. Pop it into ChatGPT if you're curious, like, what are sexy ways I can ask for consent? And it'll spit out, a million good examples for you of how to do this with playfulness and good energy.
Lee, what do you have to say about that?
I like some of the more simple and less assumptive kind of ways of asking, which could just be, sharing, I'd love to kiss you, or would you be open to a kiss, or would you like to, something along those lines. And then I think the other side of this piece, I love that Angela had so many ideas, and then also suggested, you can go searching for them. Chat GPT will give us many. The other side of that is how you respond to those requests. If you do want to, don't want to. If you do want to, that's probably very straightforward. If you don't, how you respond. And then additionally, when you're throwing out one of those flirtatious or more simple, direct, either way, how you read the other person's response, because we've had this evolution in consent over the years from kind of an assumed to assumed yes and less no, to where we're really looking for something like enthusiastic, positive verbal consent now. So yes, but with a kind of a shrug or a pull away, or all of those things would not necessarily be a yes consent. So the next piece of that would be reading those signals from the other person. If they look away from you, if they pull their body away a little bit, especially if they pull their body away a little bit without a smile. Now, if you get one of Angela's more flirty invitations and they pull their body away and they're kind of smiling and looking at you, that might be another signal of kind of, I'm going to engage with you in this kind of playfulness. And your answer could be yes, and then great. If your answer is completely no, not never, then that might be a good signal to you that you don't want to continue to see this person. But your answer could be, I'd love that just right now. And I would encourage someone to say that, like, I'd really love to do that. Not, not at this moment, or, could we think of doing that a little later, or could we think of doing that next time we meet, or whatever, but kind of verbalizing what your real desires are. Yeah.
So a lot of what you were saying, Lee, sounded to me, to make it simple. I try to make things simple because you two were describing some pretty sophisticated strategies and ways of exchanging information in subtle ways. But it sounds like a lot of it has to do with reading someone's body language at the same time as hearing their words.
Right. Yeah. There's so much for us to read in their body language, and eye contact, where someone is looking, in terms of whether they're looking at you, at your eyes, at your mouth, at your shoes, at their own shoes. If they're kind of staring across the room, or they're watching the television that's in the bar, or they're watching another person. All of those things are sending us signals. And
Yeah, and I think we can simplify it to just, I loved Lee bringing us back to this common phrase of enthusiastic consent. And that's the message we want people to take away if it's confusing, to look at all these cues is we're looking for the person you're with to have enthusiastic consent to move forward with physical stuff. And once you have that, go have fun, right? And express your no. If you don't want enthusiastic consent, that's great too. And you can do this in direct ways, and you can do it in sexy, fun ways that keep the mood going.
So can you complement like the body language with a verbal question? Like, let's say you do your hand and then you pull it back and they seem to move toward you. Then can you say, oh, does that mean we can have sex
so glad
tonight?
you brought this up, David, because we're talking about consent like it's like yes or no. And there can be consent for one thing and not another thing, right? Consent to hold hands and not to have sex.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And it can be, I think, nerve-wracking on the side of either the person who's kind of more in the initiator role and nerve-wracking on the side of the person who's not, feeling nervous about those things lining up.
Yeah, I had a number of patients, actually age 16 to all ages, guys who were very anxious about sex and feeling I won't be able to, what if I don't get an erection? That would be terrible and I'll be rejected and all of that. And something that, was a little deceptive, but again, in a kind of playful way that was so helpful, I think, to just about all of them was just this Masters and Johnson idea that to say, I'm thinking maybe we could, we've been on a couple of dates. Maybe we could, spend the night together and kind of cuddle. I'm not the kind of guy that likes to hop into the sack with someone, but it would be okay to just kind of cuddle and get to know each other a little better, and then. Once then they feel safe, like they've already announced that we're not going to have sex, and that's a pretty safe proposition. And then inevitably, what happens is then they start fooling around at things, and suddenly the excitement comes, the erection comes automatically. But it's just a little thing that was helpful to a number of guys I worked with.
Yeah, there's lots of research when you take the pressure off erection or orgasm, that actually it happens more freely, and that is a fun thing to do with couples. And I think for the consent conversation, we'd just be encouraging the asking for consent along the way, right? Cuddling doesn't turn into intercourse without explicit enthusiasm from both partners, which is obvious to you, David, that transition would only happen, right, with the enthusiastic consent in between it of, oh, are we going to move forward with this, right? So that we're not catching someone off guard. Yeah, that's good research. People can look into more. The Masters and Johnson stuff is old classics that have a lot of helpful stuff in them.
I thought there was a lot of great stuff in there. You're right. Not only for single people, but especially for couples. It was all, designed to help couples. I don't know why we don't hear that much about it anymore. Or maybe sex therapists are still using those concepts and sensate focus and all of those techniques. I thought they were pretty brilliant.
One area I think can be helpful is that sometimes we're in a relationship with someone, in an early relationship with someone we're like really excited about, and we're hoping they're going to do X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. Maybe it's text us every morning or night, or send us a note or something like that. And we don't have to feel completely powerless in that situation. Just kind of, we don't want to be get in the place of kind of desperation for something that's not happening. It may be that thing just isn't on their map yet. We want someone who's willing and interested to kind of build something with us. And it might be that they're willing, but they just don't have those. They haven't put that on their toolkit yet. And so we can lead in that way, very in a very small, subtle way, by like, say, I'm wanting to, do a nightly good night text. I've been, dating this person. I feel like it's kind of serious and at that stage, but that hasn't happened yet. So if I'm the person who's wanting that and it's not happening, I don't have to rely on the other person and hoping that they're going to want to. I can take like a small initiative step. And this is just one example of take one small step to kind of give an example of what we'd like, and then get data, find out, and see if the other person would kind of be willing to pick that up and reciprocate with us. And then again, we're playing in a way that we'd like to.
Can you give an example? Because like some of us have concrete minds, and so we need a specific
maybe
example.
that example of a good evening text or a good night text, right? Say I'm dating someone. I really wish they would send me a good night text, but they have no way of knowing either that I'm wishing it, or maybe it's just not something they've ever done. So instead of kind of silently telling myself, oh, they don't like me, or they're they don't know how to text people at night, I could just send them a good night text. Good night. Maybe I'll do it once or twice, maybe 3 times. And then I'm hoping that they'll reciprocate, but I don't know that they will. And that might be good information for me to find out. Like if I do that 2 or 3 times and then I give some space, it's good to kind of step forward and then step back and give some space for the other person to kind of pick it up, because we most often want there to be some mutuality in our relationship. Then we can see, do they respond by sending a couple good night texts? And if they do, like, what fun. Now you might be trading off doing that and have that thing you were so desiring. So I encourage our listeners and us not to kind of pine away for something that we wish would happen, but to take small steps to kind of introduce that into the relationship, and then see if your potential partner, if you're the person you're with, wants to kind of play with you in that way.
And that guy Stewart used to suggest similar things for couples, actually, to find out what it is that your partner would really enjoy you doing for them that would feel loving to them, because we often do things for our partners or husband, wife, partner, whatever, that we think is loving, but it's not what they would interpret as loving. And exactly. And it might be something like just I love it when you make me a cup of coffee in the morning, or whatever it happens to be.
And if we want to encourage those behaviors, I love how you said, David, like, I love it when you do this. That's a great way, when they do the thing. If the person does text us good night, we can go, oh, I love when you text me good night, right? I love when you make me coffee.
Yeah.
And then, letting them know like a week later if they do it again. Yeah. I love it when you make me coffee. Kind of treasure that.
Yeah.
That piece.
Yeah. Yeah. And using positive reinforcement, like if you're dating someone and I mean, this sounds very game playing, but it's really pretty effective, who you're interested in, and you want that, let's say it's a fellow, and you want him to be calling you more often. When he calls, you can say, "Oh, it's so great to hear from you. You're one of my favorite people. Listen, I'm just heading out the door because I've got another commitment right now, but it's so cool when you call." And so that's doing that, using the time issue, and not, giving them too much. And then you can even, this probably sounds terribly outdated, but, give them a little gift or something to reinforce the fact that they called you. Like maybe they like a particular kind of candy or something, and next time you see them, you could say, "Oh, I saw this, pick this up for you," or something along those lines. But you can do a lot. Maybe we could have another podcast on it. But you can shape other people's behavior with positive reinforcement, but not by being of limited availability to a certain extent.
And we can always give.
Is that too gamey?
I think we want other people's
No.
feedback as well. Like if we call someone and they really appreciate it, I'd love to hear that. And we can always give the gift if of candy. We can also give the gift of our like enthusiastic warmth and attention. That's one of the most treasured gifts we could give someone.
Yeah. All righty, folks. Well, thank you so much, and make sure you read the show notes, because there was so much wisdom and wealth of information here that the show notes might help you digest some of these gold nuggets.
Yes, Angela and Lee, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast, and I hope you come back again.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Good luck everyone out there in the dating world.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Angela. Great to be with you.
Yep.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.